down. A man who believes in punching up, not down. This is the Situation Room. The only way to start your day.
8 after 9, now getting into the final hour of the Situation Room for today, this lovely Tuesday, the 6th day of August 2024. How are you doing? Karibu sana, and thank you very much for everybody who's tuned in wherever and across the globe. In the next hour, we want to talk about youth and innovation. Youth and innovation. Sounds like, it's a cliche. It's one of those things that vijana wapate nafasi za ajira, vijana watengeneze vitu, waingie kwa kompyuta, wafanye nini.
Automate wheelbarrow.
All these things, it sounds like. But then, there's somebody who's actually tasked with making sure that these things happen, and they happen well. He is the CEO of the Kenya National Innovation Agency, KENIA. Kenya. He is Dr. Tony Mwansa. Good morning, Dr.
Good morning. Thanks very much for having me here. You're right. That's what I'm tasked to do every day. Yeah.
Now you move that thing from just rhetoric to practical reality.
That's correct.
Youth, innovation, and making sure that the youth who are innovating are making a living out of it. And they're driving change for the country. We'll talk about that.
Absolutely.
But first, one of the innovative things that you need to do is think about your own body, all right? And that is making sure that at least you are healthy. You are trying as much as possible to be healthy. And you try as much as possible to be healthy by knowing the health status of your body. Unaenda, unaingia, unainuliwa juu, wanafanya check. Wanaangalia kama umepoteza alignment. Wanaangalia kama una leak oil. Wanaangalia kama tires zimeisha nini?
Kama shock absorber.
Kama shock absorber zimeisha.
Nasema sakamzoba.
Sakamzoba. Wanaangalia kama sakamzoba. Hapo iko sawa.
Yes.
Kama unamwaga oil.
Yes.
Yeah, hizo vitu zote they check.
Ball joint.
Kama ball
joint iko sawa.
Yes?
Kabisa.
All those things. Na brake pads zinafanya kama need replacement. Yeah? So that happens at the Aga Khan University Hospital, and it's at clinics across the country. Okay? Only 9,950. You get a comprehensive medical checkup. It's good to do it once every year. Because when you do it, then you see how you're faring. And you get a conversation with the medics that tell you, the last time you're here, your BMI ilikuwa hapa. Saa hii mahali imefika sijui nini umekula.
You're not moving. Unakula na unaiacha inakaa hapo.
You need to do something more. Hii mafuta itumike. Right?
Na miaka haisongi nyuma.
So it's important to do that.
Absolutely.
Aga Khan University Hospital, clinics, go to the nearest one in your hood. Ask them for comprehensive medical checkup. It begins at 9,950. CT.
Yes.
But here, Dr. Mwansa, the day's proverb.
Yes, our proverbs for the whole of this week are from the Republic of Botswana. To give away is to make provision for the future.
To give away is to make provisions for the future. Dr. Mwansa, what do you make of this proverb?
I was going to say, kiongozi, fafanua.
Yes, ufafanuaji wa leo ni wewe utahitajika ufafanue. Yes, tafadhali.
So, you're giving away, and by implication you're doing what?
You're making provisions for the future.
Correct.
Yes.
Because that, if you keep everything that you have, knowledge, resources, and so on and so forth, it can only be for you. Now, you can only use it so much.
Yes.
All right? But if you let go and give someone else, a child, and build a youth, and build somebody else, give them the resources, give them your time, give them your knowledge, you're actually creating possibilities of the future. That's my interpretation based on what I've not been to Botswana, though.
Your interpretation is perfect. You look to me like somebody who is church-going and God-fearing.
Equally.
Teach a child Teach a child in the way they should go, and when they are grown up, they will not depart from it. So you are giving instructions at an early age. That child grows up with it, and they become the person they are as a result of what they have been given.
Yes. Absolutely. And sometimes there are many things we may have wanted to do and we are not able to do for one reason or another. But based on the experiences and the knowledge that we have acquired, we give them to someone.
Yes.
Empower them.
Yes.
You give them a head start.
Yes.
Then you're creating a better future than it is now.
Very good. Very good. And that's why the youth need people like someone like you at the helm of the Kenya National Innovation Agency. So what's that, though?
So the Kenya National Innovation Agency, a semi-autonomous government institution that was created by an act of parliament to try and develop the national system of innovation. What that really means is, can you optimize? You know, when you say something is a system, you have just used an example of a body. You say, hii part inafanya namna gani, hii part inafanya namna gani, and so on and so forth. So what we try to do is think about education system, think about financing, think about private sector contribution, how solutions get absorbed and consumed and scaled and developed. Think about the policies and so forth. So when you say a system, you're meaning several components. Then you say, now these components individually must operate optimally, and then they must interact. So you're trying to build a system that then helps ideas to come to fruition and grow into scalable solutions that create opportunities, jobs, and wealth, and solve challenges in society. Now, you know, many a times we'll say ideas will come from young people. Others will tell you ideas will come from researchers. Others will tell you come from innovators, and will define who that is. That idea and how it gets nurtured up the value chain until it is properly funded and becomes scalable is what I have to try and think about every day. That's what the Innovation Agency is really trying to crack.
So what do you do?
What do I do? Now I have to think about all those things and do all those things. One is, how is the policy environment that enables and cushions everyone who is playing in that value chain? From a funder, if there is an investor who wants to get some return, an investor must find that innovator. The incubation facilities need to function with best practices. You know, it's possible to set up an incubation facility and then exploit people. That researchers are thinking about their research outputs and go beyond that level. So we work a lot with institutions of higher learning to say, you know what, you don't end at a publication. Think about something else beyond this great idea that you have. All right. We're lobbying a lot for funding to support ideas to move up the value chain. We try to engage a lot with private sector, try and invite them to participate and be more organized in the way we participate in identifying ideas and supporting them. We spend a lot of time pulling together partners of different categories. You know, government come together with private sector and academia and think about the policies and the strategies and the methodologies. I'll give you one classic example of work I have done for the last 7 months or so. Would you say your universities are entrepreneur?
No.
Kenyan universities?
Yeah?
No.
Classic example.
No, they wouldn't. But would I say that the students who are in our universities have an entrepreneurial spirit? I would say they do.
Absolutely, yes. Now, that student operates in an environment.
Yes.
That environment makes them better or same or worse. Now, we have a duty to strengthen the entrepreneurial potential of the university, which is now the environment where that student operates, in terms of how they are incentivized, how they are trained, the networks they build, the leadership and how it inspires them, the funding that they can access to develop their ideas further, and so on and so forth. So you can see, all problems are my problems.
So in the last 7 months, what have you done about the universities?
Good. So for the university, we did several things. One, we designed a maturity framework. You have to find a way to measure. When you say they are not, are they 0 or 1 or 2 or 10? And are they all the same level? All right? So first thing is measure.
What university as an institution?
As an institution.
Okay.
Okay. So we designed a maturity framework that we use to measure, and we've digitized it, and we are able to evaluate.
What are you measuring?
We measure
how many businesses a university runs.
Exactly. How many startups are you producing per year? How favorable is that environment?
Wait. How many startups are started by students in a university, or how many startups as a university?
So the student is in a university.
Yep.
So the student is facilitating the graduation of that startup, the nurturing and development of that startup. So by and large, the student is the one building it anyway, but the university has to provide that environment,
So
and encourage and support and build partnerships, leverage the brand basically.
Right.
And so the university has to have a target of how many startups will you produce through your students and faculty and researchers per year. That's an example of something to measure.
Okay.
How much money are you able to put to the student community who want to innovate? That's something to measure. How entrepreneurial are you as a leader? That's something to measure. And also show me the evidence that you have an entrepreneurial way of looking at things, your policy. How many incubation centers do you have? You know, there are universities that don't have a single incubation center. That's your idea.
Apart from KU, who else has one?
Exactly.
Well,
I didn't want to mention. There are a number that have.
Dedan Kimathi.
University of Nairobi has some facility. Okay. Even Kabrak, as an example, Strathmore University.
Yeah.
So those are parameters you can look at, all right? Internationalization. You know, it's very easy to think that you are top of the world until you see what the rest of the world does in this regard. There are universities I have met out there that say we produce one startup per day.
Per day.
That's our target, 365 per year.
Doctor, I want us to pause for a while and take a few steps back. Before one has an idea that eventually comes as a startup, do you train people in grant writing? Do you train them to understand how it is you can get money, how you can convince someone to actually give you money to do this thing that you want to do?
Yes. So, you have talked about grant.
Yeah.
You know, in the very early stages of innovations normally move from level 1 to 9. There is what we call technology readiness levels. Okay. Now, in your very early stages, 1 and 2, you will generally need grants to test your ideas, to validate assumptions. So you must develop the skills to convince someone that money is better with me than with you. And I will make you look good by that which I do using your money.
Yes.
So I have to build a skill for grant writing. Absolutely, yes. And institutions, for example, like the National Research Fund, were designed specifically to do that. TRL 1 and 2.
National Research Fund of which country?
Of any country.
We have one here.
This is why they were created. We have one here. Into the details of it. But you're right. That's early stages is about grants, it's about donations, it's about money from friends, money from family to help you test your ideas and get your assumptions right. Then as you move up, you start attracting angel investors, people who want a return for what you have. You move up the value chain, you get VCs who then also take equity and help scale your idea. So that in a nutshell, how it will move from level 1 to 9. Answered your question? Yes.
Partly, yes. You see, the reason why I started with the grant writing is this. The discipline required to actually be able to write a grant, which even gives you 2 shillings. Okay. Then the rigors of meeting the requirements of the person who actually gives you the grant. It's a process that is exceedingly valuable. So that by the time somebody has written a couple of them, they will have the gravitas to be able to actually understand, one, how you handle the funds, that how you actually put it into things you have said you will do. Mistakes will be made along the way. Why am I saying this? Because this is what grows on to what you've said, the 9, where now you get to a point where you even have an institute, meaning you've gotten the sort of funding. And if you're within an institution, that gives that institution the sort of reputation that enables it to create partnerships and also to get more money. Now,
you're right.
I don't see it happening with our universities. That's where I'm going with this discussion. I don't see it, which means it isn't being done enough now. Tell us how it is that you and the entity that you are CEO of helps our institutions. It doesn't have to be a university, it could be a TVET. How you help them understand this process and how they can inculcate it into the process of learning that students have from the time they come in. So it's not just learning to look for a job, no. Learning to create ideas that can actually make you money.
Super. So thank you very much. Now, as an institution, my job is to make sure that these institutions are doing that for their beneficiaries. So even before I go there, in our assessment of the institutions, we have level 1 to 5 in terms of how we assess the institutions. all universities that we worked with in Kenya are either level 1 or 2 in terms of their maturity level as an entrepreneur institution. Why are they level 1 and 2? Several factors, and one of them being their capacity to train the student to attract money.
Yes, the human resource that is necessary to bring this to pass, yes.
There you go. The teaching and learning, how it's done to produce the entrepreneur. They have all agreed, by the way, it was a self-evaluation. It's not me who evaluating. It's self-evaluation. They evaluate themselves and they agree that we are actually at a fairly early stage. Now, after that, what we say is let's now help you to rethink the way your teaching and learning is taking place so that you can build more entrepreneurs, people who can attract money, among other things. Now, I cannot come and train all the 60-plus universities, but you have to build the systems internally. I will tell you what it means to have a good program that builds capacity in the young people, all right? And you implement it, and then you evaluate yourself, and I will also do evaluation, and we also do some peer evaluation. So the answer lies in getting the right partners at the implementation level and build the capacity of faculty to ensure that they can teach their students more appropriately. So one institution can't do it all. But somebody has to check someone else whether they are doing it right or not, and tell them what you need to do in order to do it right. And I do engage vice chancellors all the time about how would you ensure your system does it better, because you hold 10,000, 20,000 students around you. And we've worked with a number of partners to try and help review how the teaching and learning is taking shape, and then we evaluate again after another year. It's not an easy thing, but we have to keep doing it, and we must do it.
Do you insist that there must be an end goal for students and faculty in this respect? I am drawn to the example of Estonia, where they have a similar system, but part of the innovation is to source the funds, but also have a project which should be working by the time you actually exit that institution of learning. So meaning, when you exit, you can actually be self-employed.
Correct.
Okay? So it's actually practical. Now, this is not an idea you want to start when somebody goes to a higher institution of higher learning. This is something that somebody needs to be taught at an earlier stage.
At the earlier stages,
yes. So that when they get to university, it's just a continuum at a higher level. I'm saying this because if I look at something that hit our papers a while back about Kenyan students who are writing papers for people abroad. Successfully, not just writing, successfully. Well, it's innovation. So it means they can conceptualize, they can think, and they can write. How do you harness these talents at a younger age so that by the time they get to institutions of higher learning, all they're doing is now fine-tuning these skills, that they had.
So you've mentioned several points in there. One of them being, how do you ensure that students are not just completing academic outputs, and instead they are producing ventures? Now, unless, you have to direct that effort, and that's a decision that the university has to make. And I have engaged the Commission of University Education, for example, around the policy and the framework for teaching. So we call this venture-based learning or problem-based learning. All right. So we'll say you're going to sign up with a problem.
No, problem-based learning or problem-solving based learning?
We call it problem-based learning as a jargon, but it's about solving a problem.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's problem-solving. That's correct, all right? So when you start with a problem, and you spend time to make sure you understand the problem. What problem could we be solving? Because it's a project, and it has to be a venture at the end. And ventures are about solving specific challenges in society for which people want to pay for. All right? So if people have a pain point, and you solve that pain point, and they feel relieved from that pain, they pay for it, not once, but twice, and they become repeating customers. So that model has taken off. Not many universities are implementing, but Dedan Kimathi has actually begun to implement the venture-based program. So it's a master's program, and you come out with an enterprise at the end of it, Whether you choose to run with it after that, that's debatable. But a number of them actually, once you've created interest and exposed them, and it must be intrinsically motivated to solve that problem. So they must be very excited. They learn how to build the right teams, how to have complementary skills that will then tackle this and build an enterprise out of it. So that has already taken. That's part of what we evaluate institutions. That how are you shifting more from academic for purposes of producing a thesis to I'll give you a classic example. When I was at University of Nairobi and I've taught, I started this program where I would say I was teaching computer science students. I have everybody working on a small project. I said, why would you all work on a small project and then after 6 months you hand a report and you go away? Why don't we organize you in teams and you create an ERP? Yeah, each of you create a module on the ERP and produce an ERP and from there build an enterprise out of it. In fact, the other day I was beginning to ask how many universities are using a non-Kenyan ERP, and it's mind-boggling.
What an ERP is to our
enterprise resource planning
yes.
system, which is one that enables you to manage an organization end to end, from procurement to finance to human resource to Now, building such a system does require your ability to understand an organization and then create something that enables them to track the data all the way to sales and so on and so forth. And the amount of money that we are spending on ERPs that are not developed locally is mind-boggling. I'm not here to mention numbers, but it is worrying. It's a worrying trend because we are always buying a solution from somewhere out there. And those are the opportunities we should be creating for the youth. Every other day we say that the youth are amazing, very talented, but they should not always work for someone. We create an environment for them to create these kind of solutions. And I have tested that environment. Now, on the issue as to can you come earlier in the growth of a child so you expose them? Absolutely. That's part of why CBC was being created, to diversify the thinking and create more interest in entrepreneurship. I just looked at the Vision 2030 and I learned that the dream we have is to have a dynamic and empowered youth in leadership and entrepreneurship for a globally competitive country.
What exactly does that statement mean?
Thank you. The depth of it, whether you're building your next generation to become effective leaders and entrepreneurs. And that effectiveness, I feel we still have a lot of ground to cover in the way we build our young generation to be more entrepreneurial. So you're right that at earlier stages, there are many players who are active, institutions like Young Scientist Kenya, to try to build more entrepreneurial mindset at the early stage, so that by the time you get to college, you are more about building practical solutions for society.
Let's take a break at that note. Dr. Tony Omwansa is the CEO of the Kenya National Innovation Agency. Basically, your main mission is to make sure that you're encouraging people to come up with ideas and to move those ideas from just their head into something that's practical.
Correct.
Many will fail, and then there are those that will succeed. And those that succeed, that's what we're looking for.
Correct.
So you need that environment to be working.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
We continue this conversation shortly. 29 minutes to 10. Let's take a look at the weather, and then we come back.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your...
This week on What's Your Story,
Waona kama ataweza binti yetu.
Mtoto wa Simba ni Simba. Huyu bwana alipomtaja Hamida kama mrithi wa uongozi wake, basi niaminini nimehisi zaidi ya mnavyohisi nyinyi. Naomba mnisikilize jameni. Sijui nyinyi, lakini kwangu mimi kura yangu ni kwa Hamida Kombo.
Jabir, tutaonana tena.
Siwezi kupa uhakika wa hilo. Yale uliyofanya ni mambo ya kitoto.
Kumshukuru mtu aliyetusaidia.
Sasa utashukuru watu wangapi? Sawa, niambie wataka nini?
Nakutaka wewe.
Pole. Nishaposa. Lazima ukweli uzungumzwe.
Kweli gani? Labda tueleze kweli kilichotokea baina yako na mzee Gama.
Mimi sijali unavyochukulia, lakini haya yote nafanya kwa sababu ya mwanangu.
At Standard Talanta Academy, a collaboration between Talanta Institute and Standard Group, we are forging the next generation of media moguls, driving economic transformation and shaping the future. Introducing our flagship program, the Media Mastery Course. From TV and film production, photography to digital journalism, we are about action. Our hands-on approach means you will be creating, producing, and innovating from day one. But we don't stop at technical skills. We empower you with life and entrepreneurship skills. And with Standard Group, home to KTN, Radio Maisha, Spice FM, Vibes Radio, The Standard Newspaper, and more, you'll have unparalleled access to real-world experience and opportunities. Enroll now and ignite your journey in the heart of the creative economy. Visit www.talanta.ac.ke or call 0724 468 468 for more information. Standard Talanta Academy. Unleash creativity.
Start thinking of ideas from problem, from venture, think ideas, then you have a conducive environment that supports you with that. Is it a mandate of institutions of higher learning to support innovation? Are they well-resourced to support innovation? When we see all those, we see the hub at KU, we see Dedan Kimathi University, we see in the private universities, like I said, Strathmore University and others, where we see that, we see a lot of vibrancy in terms of, people just trying to come up with ideas and thinking ideas. But is it a mandate of all institutions of higher learning to have this?
Very good question. It looks like you have, you almost became a professor.
Buana.
Sasa, what is to educate? That's where I would start. And what I lack is a Latin word that is called educare, which means to bring forth. Bring forth the potential that there is in someone. All right? So you have these students that you've been given coming from all over the country around you, and you are trying to bring forth the potential there is in them. That's one perspective, that what I'm producing in you is that which you're capable of doing, and I create an environment for you. Now, we have people who run organizations later, who build organizations later, and that nurturing of their potential happens in an education institution that provided the environment that they needed, the pieces and pieces they need to test themselves and develop the entrepreneurial capacity. The second thing I want to lay as a foundation to your question is Education 5.0. Now, Education 3.0 means you do teaching, you do research, and then you do community development. 5.0 means now you start thinking entrepreneur, you're thinking about innovation and industry. So, you see, education as was originally conceptualized as a conveyor belt, whereby you put people at the beginning, you give them a test, you tell them something, process them something. And by the way, the person who created the education system was informed by the industry, because industrialization happened before education, formal education system. That's why you will put the same number of children in a class, same age, process them, evaluate them, move them to the next one. That is industrial. Ukifika pale mbele, ukisema huni mujinga, unamutoa, unamurudisha, because that's a reject in an industrial environment. Then you move a few to go to market. That is, you become a professor, the cream of society. That is how it was conceptualized. But if it's the essence of education is to bring forth the potential there is in people, we have all globally gravitated that it is a responsibility of the institution to build the entrepreneurial capacity of a student. Not all of them will become, but those who will should be supported to be so. All right? Now, whether the institutions have what it takes to do that is an ongoing journey. In the sense that government will give you some resources. And by the way, government is shifting even its funding process and not give institutions money. It is giving a scholarship to a student to go and get educated there. Government gives you money, that's okay. But then the institutions have a responsibility and an obligation to diversify resources that they need to build these additional pillars of 5.0. And there are many sources. And if you are bold enough to look for them, you will get them. There are institutions that have more. I will give my personal example. I began an institution about 3 years ago, a government institution. Now I have more funding from private sector and development partners and so on and so forth than the exchequer. So there's nothing strange about raising money because you have the space to do so. And globally, when you look at the trends of some of the leading institutions, government funding is a smaller percentage. So you get the resources to do the many other things. Partnerships. I just came from India, and I went to IIT, which is one of the best universities in India. The incubation centers in the universities are not run by the university. It is private sector that is given space by the university to come and run incubation programs. Why? Who understands incubation better than private sector? I have a big problem when government tries to do everything, including trying to nurture, run incubation programs and so on and so forth. Bring private sector into the equation. You will save money and you'll get better outputs.
Because they're motivated.
They are motivated, and that's their core business, is to build enterprises. Me, as a university, maybe my core business is to educate, right?
Yeah.
Then just synergize with the right partners and they will run that for you.
Okay. Yeah. When the youth innovate or when they're coming up with ideas, do they understand that ecosystem? What happens? So I have an idea, I want to build something. I want to come up with this is the problem, and I am coming up with a solution for it. Do they understand what it takes? Or because that's where now you'll be like, okay, so how will I benefit from this? How will I make sure that I'm not telling so and so that they run away with my idea? How do I protect my idea? How do I fund my idea? How do I grow my idea? And the kind of support that I need.
Many people wonder why I talk about institutions of higher learning a lot when I speak about innovation. It's because that's the largest population of young people in an organized setup. And if you crack that, you're cracking a large level of influence and the cascaded influence that it will have. And the answer starts to answer your question. By the way, I really like the way you've used the word ecosystem, because innovation is an ecosystem issue. No one institution or one individual answers everything about an innovation ecosystem. Innovation and development of ideas. And I gave the illustration of innovations moving up the value chain from level 1 to level 9. What that means is that the level of support you need and the kind of support you need at every level is different. And the partner you need at every level is different. You don't need intellectual property protection at the very end, nor at the beginning. It is going to happen somewhere along the way. Okay? The kind of funding you need at different levels of maturity is different. Government may be willing to give you a grant, all right? But private sector is not going to give you a grant. So the grant is normally very good when you're testing your ideas and validating ideas. But when you really need to scale, you need private sector funding and experience and market realities and analysis to then scale your idea. So to answer then the question about whether the youth understands, what we're trying to do is build the ecosystem mindset. All right? And this is why the institutions of higher learning play a very crucial role, because if they grasp the concept that we are building an ecosystem within the institution so that the student understands that you need different levels of support up the value chain. And for you to test that environment, you need an incubation center. And that's why for me, every university must run an incubation center, because that's the environment that helps a student in a real sense, not in an academic sense, in a real sense, to understand the various elements I need to build my idea. The skill sets that I need, the team that I need, I pilot it and I test it in that safe environment. The university is a very safe environment. You can get exemptions, you can work at night without a problem, and so on and so forth. By the time you get out, some realities strike, and you better have known what that means to do. Of course, there are incubation centers outside the formal education system, especially for youth who didn't go through that process. But I do have a big burden on how we leverage the institutions to strengthen the ecosystem mindset. And then when we produce people out there, they are able to interact better and influence others. Now, again, you're talking about a skill issue. Does a typical young person understand and have the skills to understand that it's an ecosystem issue? That this is where I'll get this support, this is where I'll get this support, and this is how I'll build up the value chain. That is how they have been developed. And that's where educare, go back to education. The education is not about how much you memorize. It is how much you're able to adapt to the environment and then produce the potential that there is in yourself. And the teacher has a big responsibility in building that capacity. Last but not least is the way education took place 10 years ago is not the same way it will take now, and is not the same way it's going to take tomorrow. Which means the person who is building the potential of this young person. I mean, we're talking about 23 million or so young people by the time we're in 2030 of Kenyans who are classified as young. It means we must be thinking nationally how we have ecosystems in different places that nurture that capacity of young people, knowing that they will get what they need along the way.
Now, it's Kenya's responsibility
Yes.
to make sure that this happens.
Correct.
You've been in existence for how long now?
3 years now.
For 3 years. So give us a case study of what you've done so far and how it's changing. Changing system, changing mindset, encouraging innovation.
Okay, so great. So since we started, of course, I walked in and find an empty institution and we started building the system. So the first 1 or so years, you have to develop your instruments, get your board in place, get your staff, start recruiting and so on and so forth. And we developed a strategic plan, and we have 2 pillars that we focus on. One is around what we call commercialization systems. So here we're helping institutions to think through their policy, their funding, their culture, and so on and so forth. And then the second pillar is on the startup ecosystem. And so here we work with a number of startups. I will give you so many examples of success. So I'll pick one on the commercialization systems, and I'll pick one on the startup ecosystem.
Okay.
Those are our pillars. So on the commercialization systems, we run a program for vice chancellors, because I realized one thing: if you can transform the institutional leader of universities, cumulatively you are impacting a very huge population. All right. So I do train vice chancellors. Now, sometimes you think vice chancellors don't need to go to class, but I do. And if today I were to take you to about 14 vice chancellors whom I've worked with, you will sense the transformation that is happening. Each of them has developed a master plan, a 3-year innovation master plan for their own institution to try and re-energize and transform the institution. I can give you a list of a couple of them. Classic example, right now, University of Nairobi has a 5-point strategy going forward. They're setting up through the support of the Chancellor now, they're setting up the Kennedy, Kennedy School of, the one in the US in Harvard. They're going to be a campus in Nairobi on leadership. And it's going to be anchored in University of Nairobi. It's actually going to be potentially called Obama, and he's going to come here and launch it. They're setting up an innovation hub, thanks to that similar effort. There's already one innovation hub that is being put up in Kabete. The structures are already up. It's going to concentrate, that one's going to concentrate on the agricultural value chain. Classic example. I would take you to, I'm taking 14 vice chancellors to India next early October, because they're part of that training program. It's an experiential opportunity. We're going to immerse ourselves in IIT. I can tell you for free, the mindset of the institutional leadership is changing, and they're taking action about it. All right. I'll come to the startup ecosystem kind of support. We now are very close to attracting close to 14 billion from Africa Development Bank, specifically for the startup ecosystem, around funding, supporting very promising ideas. And we have just attracted some funding from IDRC as well, kind of closing down on that one. Another program with JICA, who have, what I did is we developed a 10-year innovation master plan. That's where I kicked off this from. And the president was gracious enough to launch it. We do run an annual Kenya Innovation Week. So the president came and we kicked off a 10-year innovation master plan of what we think we need to do to transform the ecosystem. 1, skills. 2, infrastructure and access to funding. 3, access to markets. 4, policies. And so we then translated that into specific programs, and a number of partners have come on board trying to, jumpstart the efforts. When government defines a direction, you easily get a lot of partners around it. On that same space of startup program, we created what we call a Presidential Innovation Challenge and Award, and that we kicked off last year. we had quite some funding, about 70 or so million to kick off the pilot. And we ran a national program saying, hey, do you have an amazing idea? We will give you funding and we will give you support. And by November last year, we had the best winners from 30 counties who successfully met the requirements. And then each of them at national level now, the top were getting 5 million, and then the county ones were getting 500,000 or so to jumpstart their innovative startups. And now we're providing a lot of support, mentorship, coaching, and holding. We've looked for a number of industry players who are providing that support. And I would say that's a classic example of a scouting mechanism, a nurturing mechanism, and releasing mechanism. And I hope that we will scale these initiatives as we go forward.
2 questions.
Go ahead.
The VCs whom you will take with you to India,
Yes.
Immerse them into this whole ecosystem.
Yes.
In the hope that thought processes and whatever else goes along with it will be changed to cater for these changes that you want. How will you measure the understanding and the measurement? What is this output that you will want to see that will then inform you that indeed
change is happening?
Yes, and then that visit was not a waste of time.
Okay. So, skills is one thing I mentioned in our 5-pillar strategy, of innovation transformation. And skills starts with a child or a youth or a grown-up or an institutional leader. So skills, we understand why we have to keep doing skills here. But then skills is not an end by itself. Skills, it's a means to something. So this vice chancellor who acquires some new skills must then translate that skill into something. So what we've done is we asked all the vice chancellors that we are going to help you to build a transformation plan for your institution that you own and are going to drive. Okay? Now, the quality, then I tell you what should be in your transformation plan. You should be thinking about your policies, because you're the head of institution, your policy. For example, what is the IP policy for your institution? Or what is the startup policy of your institution? Okay, what is your plan around infrastructure enhancement for innovation? What is your plan for innovation funding? Do you have a framework to allocate some funding for, or what are you going to do with the teaching and learning, so that you can encourage more and more entrepreneurial mindsets and so on and so forth? Those are the things that you must think about. Okay. Even if I take you to India and Europe, those are the things you're going to see how they've actually done that. So once we agree that this is it, you have to translate this into a transformation plan and say, this is where you are as an institution, and this is where you want to be in 3 years. So each of them has done a draft transformation plan. All right? Now, when you own that plan as an institution, then you ask, whom can you work with to operationalize? So as an institution, you're going to allocate some resources, you're going to put a team and so on and so forth. And the innovation agency is going to support you as follows. So we already have some interventions of supporting institutions, but those interventions must be informed by your transformation plan that you own. If I take you to India, it's not just for academic reasons, but you go and match your transformation plan and this institution. Then you go, no wonder they got this partner. No wonder. So that it becomes kind of a light bulb for your own work. All right? And then we have a session while in India to reflect on, so what are you going to do with your plan based on what we have interacted on? Okay. So when we go back, this is your commitment of what you're going to follow through. And I'll give you a last initiative that along the same line, 2 initiatives. Remember I mentioned an evaluation framework for institutions. I don't evaluate individuals. It doesn't really, it's a component. The vice chancellor is a component of an institution. So our maturity framework evaluates the entire institution. So when all the institutions came to me, and the vice chancellors were seated there, and we all agreed that all your institutions are either level 1 or 2. None of you is level 3, none of you 4, none of you 5. So here's the thing. I will be coming back to do another evaluation, 6 months, 1 year. The change that will happen will be as a result of the decisions that you make as a head of institution. And in order for you not to say that you don't know the changes that you will make, I'm going to take you to an environment where you will see where change has actually happened. So there's a follow-through. So for us, we follow through that maturity framework and evaluation. Secondly, we're going to be hosting another breakfast meeting for chancellors. Right? So the intention here is chancellors, you are the one who provides strategic direction for the institution and hold the vice chancellors and the rest of the team councils and the like accountable. So once a year, we're looking now to engage, and they are the ones who tell us, how is your institution doing and how does... So sense of accountability has to be there across the board. So a trip is not just a trip. It's a means to something.
Yes, the executive and the leadership, yes, have gotten the exposure.
Good.
They're not the ones who are going to do the breaking work.
And I have the answer to that.
Yes.
So for every institutional leader, we said, you've got to give us a team of 3 minimum. The best of your brains who can help you with this journey to translate, to follow through the specifics. And we call that institutional working group. All right. And so the head of institution thinks through, and every so often, every quarter, we are holding meetings with the council. By the way, we've built something we call Kenyan network of entrepreneur institutions. And we've invited these institutions to participate. And whenever we hold council meetings, each institution must bring their key focal persons for operationalization. And we are building capacity on all those people and making sure you are supported at the institutional level, because if you don't have that, then you also struggle along the way. So there is a team for implementation, and it's also held accountable by an innovation agency.
I can hear what you're doing, Dr. Yep. You're going systemic, you are institutionalizing this idea.
Correct.
When shall we start feeling the results? When shall we start getting value for money from Kenya and people knowing, all right, so yeah, it's because of Kenya that now we have this, we have youth in creating employment, we have more money getting into our GDP.
Okay. Classic example, I was in a meeting with Britam yesterday, the head of innovation efforts in Britam. And I met, a couple of weeks ago, I also met their team. I'm going to use this just as an example. And they actually confirmed to me, we are beginning to see a difference in terms of what the students from the universities are looking like. They're already starting to feel the effect, because it's not rocket science. By the way, to help you.
What do you mean? So how?
How? In terms of how the students think through the challenges that they are solving, the solutions that they are creating, the mindset, all right? Remember I said it's about an ecosystem. So the students are beginning to be more dynamic in the way they think about their problems. You know, when I was in university, I used to have students who come from computer science department, 3 of them, and they're trying to create an enterprise. And then you say, you need complementary skills. You might not help each other by just coming from the same department. That mindset is starting to gradually change. And private sector is the one who tells you. As we speak right now, Kenya is leading in Africa in terms of attracting investment to startups in Africa. We used to have this big 4 of Ghana, Nigeria, Egypt, South Africa. This 2024,
Kenya is tops.
Kenya leads.
Okay.
All right? That's an example of an indicator. And I will tell you finally one thing that is very interesting. We've got something we call the Global Innovation Index. Kenya currently ranks number 100, and it has been dropping for some reason because of not submitting data in a timely manner. But when I went into zooming into what is it they are measuring, I realized that we perform very well on the outputs, but not on the inputs. Inputs could be infrastructure, policy, funding, and so on and so forth. Outputs is the creative solutions, the startups, and so on and so forth. So we're doing very well on the outputs, but not very well on the inputs. So if you improve the inputs a little bit, what you'll have is significant increment in the output. And that's why I'm persuaded that we are on the right track, and we're going to stick at it.
So policy and legislation. There's an innovation bill that is spearheaded by Senator Crystal Asige.
Yes,
I believe.
Yes.
Right? Have you interacted with this bill?
So this bill is actually called a startup bill.
Startups bill, yes.
There we go. So the startup bill, actually, if you study it, was crafted around the innovation agency. So when Governor Sakaja was a senator, he was fairly involved in that process as well. And the innovation agency is the anchor of that startup bill. And sometimes many people ask, okay, so why an innovation agency? Why not
a department?
Why not a department? Or why not an MSME agency, and so on and so forth? The word startup is different from, it's not about starting up. is about having an innovative, potentially scalable solution that can employ very many people and generate a lot of wealth and attract investment. You know, MSMEs generally don't go that route. They have their place. If I have a small shop and that's okay, I can reproduce another one in another town, but I never necessarily want to attract
to become
VC.
a supermarket.
Exactly. Maybe I may become a supermarket, but theoretically, I mean, conceptually, you're not trying to become a supermarket. You're not trying to attract VC funding and so on and so forth. So that's why we initiated the startup bill, so that we can think through the incentives for an innovator, the incentives for a startup, the incentive for a VC, a funder, and so on and so forth. And that value chain is unique in its own ways. So the answer is yes. At the heart of that startup bill is actually the innovation agency. And we've spent a lot of time trying to educate people. And part of the reason why I think we have not really gotten into law is because a lot of stakeholder engagement was necessary. It's a new language to a number of policymakers and practitioners. But I am persuaded, just like a few other countries, we're headed there.
Well, it's a language that you need to keep talking, because there are those who get it and there are those who are hearing you for the first time. Somebody saying, there's an agency like this one called Kenya.
Yes.
The Nairobi is saying, what is Kenya? It's a state corporation.
Yes.
Since when? What is it? So it's a language that you must keep doing.
Absolutely.
And then people will believe or will get to understand when they start seeing direct results and tying those results to the agency.
To the effort, right.
Thank you very much for joining us today, Dr.
Asante sana ndugu yangu na kiongozi.
Dr. Tony Omwansa, the CEO of the Kenya National Innovation Agency, has been our guest. Thank you for tuning in to Kenya's biggest conversation today. Tomorrow, God willing, we'll be back. Have a lovely day. 10 a.m.
See you then.